Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel. My name is Carl, and today I'm joined by Paul, and we are going to be discussing the latest developments in what seems to be a situation that is sort of dragging its heels a little bit now, so to speak. But there has been some interesting developments over the weekend and the last couple of days, and even today. But obviously, first off, Paul, thanks for coming on with us. How are you doing today?
I'm okay, mate. Had a bit of a mad last couple of hours to finish work. I went and got my second jab, and
Oh,
without
fantastic.
without grossing it out, I'm in the middle of getting me. Don't know if you can see that orange thing in my ear. I'm in the middle of getting me ear flushed out, so that's why I'm a little bit
All
late.
right.
But without grossing it out.
Okay.
But no, I'm good. I hope you are as well.
Yeah, all good, mate. So yeah, let's just jump straight into it, shall we? Yeah. So over the weekend, a lot of reports coming from some credible journalists, should we say? You know, I'm thinking Fabrizio Romano that it looked like Everton were heading in the direction of Nuno Espirito Santo. Now, this is obviously a name that has divided the fan base to an extent, and not everyone is sort of on board with this idea. So, where do you stand on the Nuno train, Paul?
I like Nuno. I'm a bit confused as to why there seems to be a lot of pushback against the idea of him. I mean, he's not Carlo Ancelotti, of course not, and in an ideal world, Carlo Ancelotti wouldn't have up sticks and left us the way he did. He'd still be the manager now and he'd be leading us next season. But Nuno Espirito Santo, I think he's, of all the realistic targets we were getting linked with, I think he's probably the best manager, and he's the continuity appointment as well, because he's not too dissimilar in his style of play like Ancelotti's is. He's not got like a set philosophy that would involve a major overhaul if he came in, like a Graham Potter would, or an Eddie Howe, or even a Unai Emery, as much as fans would want him if he was available. So I like Nuno personally. I think he's got a good personality. All right, he's not the most talkative fella in the world. He's not a shouter. He's not someone who is jumping all over the place and making a fool of himself on the touchline like some managers do. But he's the type of manager where when he's got something to say, he'll come out and say it. He won't just kind of stay within himself like maybe a Marco Silva did or Ronald Koeman did at times. And I'm really, really impressed with what he did with Wolves. I know he hasn't finished on a particularly high note last season, looking where Wolves were, but you've got to remember Wolves lost their main goal threat for 3 quarters of the season. But imagine where we'd have been without Calvert-Lewin after November.
Yeah, yeah.
God knows. And I really like Nuno. I've got time for him. And when he was getting linked with the Arsenal job, or when the Arsenal job was available about a year and a half ago, Arteta got appointed the same week, the same day Ancelotti did. I was thinking that Nuno would have been a really good appointment for Arsenal, and still think he'd be a good appointment for Arsenal now. So I'm very happy with Nuno. If Everton don't get him, then I'm convinced some club around Europe, some very big club or some very ambitious club that's looking to achieve things, would probably poach him. So fair play.
Yeah.
I'm happy with him. What about you?
I'm just pessimistic 'cause I just don't want it to end up like another Marco Silva situation. I think you are right in what you're saying, that I think it's quite easy for fans to forget, them first 2 seasons in the Premier League. Yeah, the Wolves, they were the dark horse of the campaign 2 years on the spin, they qualified for Europe last year. So, there's obviously a bit of substance there, but I just fear that it's not gonna materialize the way a lot of fans would hope. And the big fear, and I think I speak for a lot of fans when I say this, is that the last thing we need is to be in this sort of situation in 18 months' time, because that would be disastrous as far as I'm concerned. But let's just go back to the weekend and what the reports sort of said. So obviously it broke over there. I think it was
Friday night, wasn't it?
yeah, Friday night, was it? Yeah. So we started I think Sky Sports picked it up and they said Nuno Espirito Santo was close to being appointed as Carlo Ancelotti's successor, going on to say that negotiations over a number of issues, including the length of the contract, were still to be finalised, but the club would be hopeful that he would be confirmed as Carlo Ancelotti's successor within the week. Now, let's not forget, he was heavily linked with the Palace job, and then there was a few rumblings that sort of didn't come to fruition due to a few issues over his coaching staff that he wanted to bring in. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that's something which maybe he would want to bring to Everton, this whole idea that he seems to want to bring this overload backroom staff? Or
In terms of why he didn't take the Palace job to start with,
yeah,
I
or
think
do you
it's
think maybe it's a fact that Everton are the bigger club and his head's been turned by a club like Everton?
more. I think it's more the second one than it is the
Yeah,
former. I mean, it sounds like he's been quite far down the line with Palace. He's probably been in negotiations with them for weeks, and from everything we were reading and from normal, reliable journalists who report on the London clubs, it sounded like the deal was done, essentially. And then Everton swooped in at the last minute. And it sounds like, to me, I mean, I'm just guessing, that he's had the deal all ready to go with Palace. All he had to do was sign the contract. And then Everton have gone on the phone and maybe he's passed a preliminary interview sort of thing, where maybe
like
he's
a
had
verbal agreement. So
he's had he's basically had a meeting or an interview or a conversation with somebody at the club, whether it was Mashiri, whether it was Brands, whether it was Kenwright, whether it was all of them. Basically, he's been approached about the Everton job, and he's got through the initial stage, and he knows he's got through the initial stage, and he's thinking, oh, I could be on for the Everton job here. So he's gone back to Palace and maybe said to them, right, the goalposts have changed. I know we agreed a deal a week or however many days ago, but I might be getting the Everton job. And if you want me to swerve off going any further with the Everton talks, then you're going to have to change the deal and give me this, this, and this. And it sounds like Palace have gone, no, we've shook hands, we've agreed on a deal. You'd either take what we've offered you and agreed on, or you go and take your chances with Everton. We're not hanging around for you. And it sounds like Nuno's gone, well, all right, then I'll take my chances maybe with Everton. I'm guessing that because, as you said, all the usual reliable journalists like Fabrizio and Paul Joyce were saying over the on Friday evening that basically he was the guy, wasn't he? That he had the job. All he had to do was sort out the details, and I was expecting to be announced any moment over the weekend, and it was
looking that way, wasn't it? It really was looking that way. I think a lot of fans were bracing themselves for an imminent arrival, even some point to this week. I mean, we look at Santo, and he's not the worst manager in the world. We look at obviously Valencia 51% win rate, Porto 55% win rate, and Wolves 47% win rate. But of course, you mentioned before, a lot of that, it's quite easy to forget that he lost some key players. They lost Jota to Liverpool towards the end of the transfer window, not enough time to replace his goals. And then, of course, the big one for them was Jimenez when he suffered that really damaging injury. Yeah. So do you feel like maybe it would have been a different story for Wolves and Nuno if those players continued to play to the whole of the campaign? They wouldn't have had such a mediocre season as they did?
Oh, if they'd have had Jimenez for the vast majority of the season, I think they'd have finished very close to where we were, if not above us, because I know we sort of collapsed in the final weeks, didn't we, and ended up rocking up at 10th. I think they would have been at least 10 points better off with Jimenez, and if they'd have kept Jota and not sold him to Liverpool, I think Wolves would have been in the conversation again for Europe. They probably could have finished sixth. Why couldn't they go and do what West Ham ended up going on and doing? Yeah. Done it 2 years before, finishing 7th both seasons and getting Europe. So, yeah, losing Jota and Jimenez, it crippled them, didn't he? But saying that, it's not like they were in a relegation battle. It's not like they were in any dire trouble. I know the football wasn't great to watch, and they did lose a lot more games than people were used to seeing them lose compared to the first 2 seasons during the Premier League. But it wasn't like they were in any panic situation. It wasn't like Nuno was under any pressure at any point in the campaign where everyone was thinking maybe Wolves need to make a change here just to be absolutely sure they're not going to get dragged in. It never got to that stage, even though they lost their 2 best players. So it's not like Roberto Martinez where, he won the cup at Wigan, but he had this big asterisk next to him. Yeah, but he did also oversee a relegation. It wasn't the same with Nuno. They just had a below par season that was largely out of his control, and below par season for them was where did they finish? Something like 13th, 14th.
Yeah, I think they finished. It was
not great.
Mid-table, wasn't it? They didn't pull up any trees, no.
Yeah, no, I don't want to dress it up, but there's a big difference between just finishing bang mid-table and not looking very good than there is being a team that's in dire straits and was very lucky to avoid relegation. They weren't nowhere near relegation. They were still better than the likes of Burnley and the likes of Brighton and the likes of I'd say even Newcastle. I think Newcastle got above them in the end, didn't they? But over the course of the season, Wolves looked a harder task to beat than Newcastle did. So I don't think it's fair for people to just assume Nuno Espirito Santo is this sort of boring, unambitious manager who won't really take us anywhere, just basing him off last season. Maybe he will be that if he's the guy, because as we were touching upon, we all thought it was nailed on, but it's not come yet, has it? And Link's stories today particularly seem like we're still very much in the market and we're talking to other people, so maybe we'll come on to them. But if it's going to be Nuno, then I just don't understand why people are being so down about it. I think he's a very good manager at a right age who has got a good personality and is clearly capable of improving players, because I could be here for ages listing the amount of players who brought into Wolves and made better than what they were.
Yeah, I think a lot of this as well comes down to the fact how, we were also, and I made a point of this in last week's video, everyone was so content with Ancelotti, and everyone was very much of the mindset that Ancelotti was going to be here for the next 4 years. And of course, that wasn't the case. So it was always going to be, a somewhat of a downgrade. And I think that is what's on the back of a lot of people's minds. And I just can't see another Ancelotti-esque sort of manager coming in at this moment in time, at this present moment. And Nuno, for many people, probably does fit the bill. And it's a sensible thing. Now, of course, we are live on YouTube, and leave a like and a subscribe if you can, if you haven't already. And we are going to jump into a few comments right now. So let's have a little look at what people are saying. Okay, Mick Haver says the stumbling block is Dunk. Nuno wants his own staff, and Kenwright still wants Dunk around. Potentially, maybe. It looks that way.
I mean, yeah, we've been into that. I'm on another video. I'm of the opinion that Ferguson and the club both need to decide what is his long-term future, in the sense of, does he want to be a manager? Does he want to go out and be the number one himself? Or is he just happy to be an assistant / striking coach? If he's happy to just be that, then I'm happy for the club to say, no, we want him here, because he has improved Calvert-Lewin tenfold. That's evidence that Ferguson does actually do something, for all these people who say, oh, he's just there because of a jobs for mates culture. I think he has sort of proven them wrong. He has made an impact on players who he's had time to work with. But if it was a case of Nuno was saying, I absolutely don't want Ferguson there, I've got to have my own striking coach, then that's just something the club's going to have to basically bite the bullet with and say to Ferguson, right, what do you want? Do you want to stay here and just basically do whatever Nuno tells you to, even if he demotes you to something else and you work maybe with the academy or in some other role at the club? Or do you want to be a manager? And if you want to be a manager, then you're going to have to go out and prove yourself somewhere, because you're not just going to get the manager's job one day here just because you've been here for ages and we just fancy giving it to somebody rather than paying for another manager who's got a bit of a name. I think you get what I'm saying, basically.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And, I think a lot of fans have the same opinion. The whole Duncan Ferguson thing doesn't seem... And I mentioned before about being the right time for the state that the football club's in at the minute, and I probably very much agree with that. Lenny Barrett says, don't get why some fans don't want Nuno. Would love us to get Conte. Conte is a bigger name, but they both play a similar system with 3 at the back and 2 defensive midfielders. So that sort of implies that maybe that similar managers, but Spirito Santo maybe not that Hollywood name. What's your thoughts on that?
The thing about Conte is there is a big difference between him and Nuno. Conte's teams play with a lot of energy, and a lot of Conte's teams sort of die out towards the end of the season. I mean, they don't die out in the sense that they start losing games left, right, and centre, but there's a lot of players who it takes a lot out of them. A lot of players age very quickly under him. I think when he was at Juventus, the likes of Chiellini and Bonucci, those centre-halves, they were saying they won 3 titles under Conte. He was the one who kind of got Juventus going again, wasn't he? He started off that sort of domestic dominance that they've had over the last 10 years. But they said playing under him, they were complimentary of him, but they said playing under him and Allegri was so much different. Said if we were playing under Conte, then I think I might have only managed 1 or 2 seasons left in my career. Whereas the pair of them are still playing for Juventus now because Allegri came in and just basically had a bit of a different system. He demanded less of them. So the thing with Nuno is he's very compact and he's very organised, whereas Conte will still play 3 at the back, but Conte's all about getting the wing backs and all high energy, isn't he? And I'm not sure if we've got the players to do that. I mean, I think the players would have a go at it if Conte came in and wanted to implement that. I think we have got players who are willing to run, but it's just, again, there's no point trying to ask something of players that they're not capable of. So, and there's also the point you've got to consider as well. If somehow we managed to convince Conte to come to Everton, is he not just going to do the same thing that Ancelotti's done to us, where he's going to sit around for maybe a year, bide his time, collect a load of money, sit off in Crosby on the beach, and then when some super club comes knocking for him, he's just going to say, see you later, Everton, and he's going to jump at that. And you could blame him, could you? Because he, unlike Ancelotti, is still a manager who is banging his prime now and achieving things right now. Whereas Ancelotti's sort of biggest moments have all been, they're not in the distant past, are they? But Ancelotti's not really won anything over the last 4 or 5 years, even before he got to Everton. Whereas Conte's just coming off a league title win and would probably, whatever club he goes to manage, that team would probably be title favourites again if he takes over. So, as much as we'd all love Conte, I think it's just, again, it would be that, as you mentioned, that Hollywood appointment, and I think we just need to let go of that now. just being a Hollywood appointment to be in the biggest name doesn't make you the big manager.
In my opinion, definitely we're in no position for any Hollywood name source. And there has been a lot of talks about Conte today coming out, and we'll probably touch on that in a short while. But one more comment from the comment section. Inky Squid 4 says one huge benefit of having Nuno is that we could get good players like Neto or other good players. It could be alluding to Patricio, Neves, potentially even Traore. I know the jury's out with him for a lot of people. What are your thoughts on potential players that could come into the squad?
We're going to get Jorge Mendes players, aren't we? Because he's joined at the hip with Jorge Mendes. I think the Mendes was Nuno's best man at his wedding, even, or it was the other way around. They're not just sort of manager and agents who've got a really good relationship. They're actually very, very close friends away from football. Like, if it was a case of, I think one of them, if you fell out with Mendes, then I think Nuno was the type of guy where he would resign from a club if you fell out with the agent or you refused to do business with that agent. That's how close they are. So basically, we're just going to be taking all of Mendes' players, aren't we? If he comes in. Now, he's got a few good names, as you mentioned, but Neves, is he going off to Arsenal? I'm sure I read that, or is that?
Yeah, a lot of clubs are in for him. I don't think he'll be at Wolves next season, but whether he comes at Everton, I think that's a different thing.
I think he's a great player, Neves. I'd love him personally, but I just don't think Everton can get in that conversation. It would cost an absolute fortune, and with FFP, it's just not a deal that Brands is going to sign off on, I don't think. Who else? Patricio from Wolves. I'd like him. I think he'd be perfect competition for Pickford if we could get him, but it's, again, we'd have to probably pay more than we're willing to pay for a second choice goalkeeper. Or, I don't know, maybe he'd be the first choice goalkeeper, but for a goalkeeper who's not going to be the absolute nailed on number one for a decade plus, you can't be spending big money, really, can you? So, thinking of other players we could get if Nuno comes in. I mean, I've seen.
What are your thoughts on Traore? What are your thoughts on Adama Traore? Because there's been a lot made that we need some pace and wings in the side. Is he the answer for you, or do you think we should look elsewhere?
No, I wouldn't personally. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, Traore is just Alex Iwobi on protein shakes.
Yeah,
he's got 4 or 5 great performances in him a season, but there's for them there's 30 performances where he might as well not even be on the pitch. I mean, he's a frustrating player. Maybe he could come here, and he's still young, isn't he, Traore? Maybe it could click for him, and he could be a great player. I know there's been other people we've brought to the club in the past, like the likes of Pinar and the likes of Arteta, who sort of flattered to deceive at other teams, and then he got to Everton and they just sort of found consistency. So maybe I mean, I wouldn't be dead set against getting Traore, but he wouldn't be top of my.
I agree, mate. I agree. I mean, Traore, he's not as young as a lot of. I think people forget he's not even that young anymore. I think I'm with you. I think I think he's in his mid-20s now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
24, 25, I think.
Yeah, he's not a young player now. I don't think at all. I'm very much with you, mate. I feel like he's a bit of a FIFA player, a bit of a YouTube player for me.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's the answer to our problems. Okay, so we'll leave the comments there for the time being. Thanks for everyone's thoughts on Nuno. And if you are watching, do be sure to drop a like. So moving on now. There's been some discussions today that potentially the Nuno is off. It's off the table potentially, or at least talks have stalled. Now, before something's been on my mind. I want to get your thoughts on this, and anyone in the comments, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. Now, on Friday, and we spoke before about the weekend, that Nuno was a dead cert, and from what we were implying from Twitter. Why do you feel that all of a sudden now it's potentially stalled? Do you feel like it's because of these alleged backroom staff details? Or one thing that was on my mind, certainly, is do you think maybe Everton have seen the backlash from the fans and are maybe, rethinking it maybe? It wouldn't surprise me with Everton, given the lack of organisation in the past.
It wouldn't shock me. My personal opinion is I think they're just being absolutely sure before they appoint him. I think you can just picture Nuno sitting by the phone, can't you, waiting for it to ring to tell him to get up to Merseyside and he's got the job.
Yeah.
Because if Romano says that it's one step away, then it's one step away, because when has Fabrizio ever been wrong, especially about Everton? But it seems like maybe they were all ready to appoint him, and then maybe they've thought about it overnight, and maybe whether it's Brands, Mashiri, Ken Wright, whoever it is, they've gone, oh, maybe we should just go back and interview that one guy one more time, sort of thing, because they've spoke to numerous people, I'm sure of that. And it sounds like Nuno is the one that the consensus, the first choice pick of everybody. But maybe they're thinking, oh, maybe we should speak to Graham Potter one more time. Maybe we should speak to Eddie Howe one more time. Maybe we should ring up Galtier or Conte's agent one more time and just see if we can maybe just have one last go at convincing them to change their minds. I don't know, but I still think he's the favourite, Nuno. But
as of right now on Sky Bet, he is still the favourite. Yeah,
I don't think anything's happened to necessarily make them kind of change their minds on him type thing. Whether it's this rumour going around that he doesn't want Duncan there, he wants his own staff. I don't think it'll be anything like that personally. I think it will just be a case of Everton being wanting to be overcautious sort of thing, thinking, right, we've got our appointment, but maybe we should just think about it for one more day, and then one more day turns into another day sort of thing. You raised an interesting point though, when you said maybe they've seen the backlash, the fans, and maybe that's got them thinking. I definitely think that they were floating the idea of Rafa, because I saw Jim White talking about it a lot on TalkSport, and we all know Jim White's Mashiri's mate, don't we? Jim White will. Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if Jim White is talking about that on TalkSport, because he gave a lot of coverage to it last week, and that was maybe something that Mashiri has not maybe outright asked him to do, but he's kind of doing that on behalf of Mashiri. Oh, Everton fans, what would you think of Rafa coming into Everton? Maybe that question's being asked because that's what Mashiri's thinking. What would Everton fans think of Rafa? Would I get a lot of flack for bringing Rafa in? Just to touch on Rafa, he wouldn't be my appointment, and it's nothing to do with the fact that he's an ex-Liverpool manager. I just personally, I think Rafa's one of a coach who is very good at getting his name out there for jobs that he's interested in. And believe you me, he walked to Goodison Park from wherever he lives.
100%, 100%. Yeah,
he's desperate for it. And when he was linked with it 18 months ago, before Ancelotti eventually got it, I remember he went on Sky with Carragher trying to do the charm offensive, trying to walk back his comments that he said all those years ago, saying, well, technically, I didn't say Everton were a small club. I didn't mean it like that. It's like, Rafa, mate, who are you kidding? Come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're on damage control. But my point is, I look at what Benitez has done over the past 10 years, and I'm not really impressed. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I think his best days have been in the past, really, to be honest. You know, I look at Liverpool, what he achieved at Chelsea, Newcastle with what he had.
You say that, mate, but just quickly, we'll go into it. What did he really achieve at Chelsea? He won the Europa League.
Yeah, the Europa League.
He won the Europa League with a team that had won the Champions League 12 months before that. That Chelsea team that won the Europa League had Hazard in it, had John Obi Mikel in it, had John Terry in it, had Frank Lampard in it, had Ramirez in it, had David Luiz in it in his prime, had Petr Cech in it still, had Ashley Cole in it still. Think of all, and he didn't sign any of them. You don't get much credit for winning a trophy with a gang of superstars when you didn't sign any of those superstars and you're playing in a second-rate competition, which is what it was for that Chelsea squad. That Chelsea team that won the Europa League in 2013, whenever it was, that is the best team that has ever won that competition, ever, by a mile. That was a team that should have been playing in the Champions League final. Just, they had problems under, I think it was Di Matteo. They had a bit of a bad start to the season, and they crashed out the group stage. And then when they started going back to playing at the normal levels for the second half of the campaign, it didn't really matter that Benitez was the fella in the dugout. It probably could have been anybody in the dugout, and they've got their act together and ended up winning that Europa League. So he didn't do much at Chelsea for me. He didn't get Napoli into the Champions League. He won the Italian Cup, I think, but he didn't get them into the Champions League. And that's one of the very few times in the last 15 odd years that Napoli haven't got into the Champions League. Sarri took over after them, and Sarri turned Napoli into a title winning or a title contending team with the likes of Jorginho and Higuain and people like that. Then he went to Real Madrid, where he bombed out in about 3 months. He was even worse than Lopetegui was. He's probably the worst Real Madrid manager of the past 20 years in terms of how quick he was got rid of and what their opinion is of him. He went to Newcastle, where he brought Newcastle up, but a lot of managers would bring Newcastle up from the Championship. Chris Hughton's done it.
Yeah.
So maybe people will argue, because I know Rafa's got a lot of fans, even amongst Everton supporters, but I look at Benitez and I just think he's got one hell of an agent, and he's got loads of great connections in the media, because they paint him to be like he's still some sort of elite manager, when for me he's not done anything in 10 years at least to suggest he's anything close to elite.
Well, yeah, and just on Rafa there, just in the last 15 minutes or so, Duncan Castles has came out and said that Bill Kenwright is said to be the one pushing for Rafa Benitez. And I say Bill Kenwright there, who is pushing for the manager. Does that just sum up the problems at the top of the club right now? That the fact that Kenwright is the man pushing for Benitez when we've got Marcel Brands there, who just recently signed a 3-year deal?
It should
If this is true, by the way, this isn't scripture. It's true.
it absolutely should be Marcel Brands picking the manager. It shouldn't be Moshiri, and it certainly shouldn't be Kenwright, because Kenwright doesn't even own the shares anymore. Kenwright's just there for the sake of being there now, isn't he? But Duncan Castles, I don't know about him, because he's been right at times, he's been wrong at times. It's not exactly Fabrizio, is it? But he's not the Daily Star either, is he? So I don't know, but that would surprise me though if it was Kenwright being the one pushing Benitez, because I would have thought he would be the one who'd been pushing back against it the most, because he falls into the category, well, you'd think he would anyway, of being the staunch Evertonian who doesn't want the ex-Liverpool manager, and maybe it's Moshiri wanting the Hollywood manager pushing that appointment. So if that is true, and there's a chance it is, because Duncan Castles isn't a known BS talker, chatter, is he? He's been wrong, he's been right, but I'd be very surprised if it was Kenwright being the one pushing the Benitez links.
Yeah, of course. We are going to delve back into the comments shortly for everyone's thoughts on Rafa. Just for me personally, I made a point of this the other day. I just don't think Rafa's the man at all. I feel like it's going to be a nothing sign. I don't think we're in a position where we want to be going into Bramley more as an established club. We want to be playing European football. We want to be in a better position than we are now. Consistency, all of the above. And I just can't see that with Rafa. I said the other day, I can only see it ending badly if Rafa Benitez gets the job. And I just want to know what everyone else thinks in the comment section. Wormy Spoon says, I wouldn't mind Rafa, but honestly think the fans will make it difficult. And I think that's a very good point he's just raised there. I think it would only take a few games for Benitez for the tide to turn, and the fans.
And it's a crisis, yeah. He loses 2 games on the spin. Yeah. It's a crisis automatically, isn't it? There's the agent Rafa shouts, isn't it? It would.
Oh, yeah.
That's not fit. That wouldn't be fair against him, because I think if he did get the Everton job, he would put his heart and soul into it. He would genuinely give it his best. But there's always going to be those supporters who don't believe that, are they? There's always going to be those supporters who are going to just look for any reason to jump on him, and it would just make the situation it would become untenable very, very quickly, wouldn't it? So even if he was Pep Guardiola and he'd won 4 or 5 leagues over the past 7 or 8 years, it would still be difficult for him just because of the history. I mean, personally, I can look past that. The fact that he was Liverpool manager a long time ago, and Liverpool managers have come along since him who've achieved a lot more than he has, and are more loved than he has. He's not as popular with Liverpool fans as he was maybe 10 years ago, because they've got a new hero to worship now, haven't they? So again, it's too much baggage for too many supporters, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Erwin Koeman says he will be on the back foot from day one. And that, again, it just reinstates what we say. He's gonna come in with the rods for his own back straight away. And again, I just don't think that is what we need right now. Lenny Barrett says Rafa plays terrorism football. Absolutely not. Definitely in the against Rafa. Think Dunk could probably learn a bit off Rafa, Wormy Spoon says.
Oh, we would, but
I'd like to think he's learned a lot already from the likes of Ancelotti. And
I'm sure he would, but I wouldn't be bringing Benitez in just so we can make Duncan Ferguson a better coach. Do you know what I mean? We need to bring a manager in who's going to get the club going, even if it means you want a manager to come in and get the club moving forward, even if it means having to dispense with Duncan Ferguson. If the club are dead set and keeping Duncan Ferguson in the role he's in. But I hope whoever does come in, whether it's Nuno or someone else, does keep Ferguson there, does keep him involved. But if that comes to pass, then I hope that's the end of the Duncan Ferguson for manager talks, because if Ferguson doesn't leave the club to go and manage somewhere else, then that's essentially him, for me, throwing in the towel on being a manager. And there's nothing wrong with that. If he doesn't want that, if he looks deep within himself and he thinks, you know what, I've had a taste of management, I enjoyed it, it will always be an honour getting that caretaker spell at Everton, but I've decided that, long term, managing a club 365 days a year, it's just not for me, then that's no problem. But if Ferguson doesn't get the job this time, then he never should get the job, unless he goes out and proves he's good enough to have the job.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of fans in the last couple of weeks who are of the opinion of it. If it's not now, it's never for Duncan Ferguson. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think maybe if he goes out and maybe gets a bit of experience elsewhere, and then when the time's right, potentially, when he's established himself a bit more. But I don't know. Another thing I just want to pick your brains on as well is, I know we briefly spoke about this before, and of course I want, if everyone can get involved in the comments, see what they think as well, is, it was reported by the Footy Insider 24/7 today that Everton have actually contacted Antonio Conte regarding the position of manager, and they want to keep their options open. How realistic is this going to be? Personally, I don't want him. I don't want him personally. I don't think he's the right fit. You hit the nail on the head before when you said that, the first sniff of a bigger club and he'd be off and we'd be back to square one again. And, he's had a bit of a history with having a bit of a, coming head to head with a lot of people upstairs in the boardroom. And is that what we need? It's really not. So it sounds mad that I'm dismissing the idea of Antonio Conte as manager, but we're not in any position to be messed around here, are we? We need someone who's actually going to get the club and take us forward. So what are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. He'd be a square peg in a round hole, wouldn't he? He'd be an absolutely brilliant square peg, but there's no point if you've got a round hole, have you? So, and as you touched on then, he seems like he can't help himself picking fights with clubs. He fell out with Juventus, didn't he? Even though he was basically riding high, he won 3 league titles with them. I think his famous quote was, "You can't eat in €100 restaurant with €10 in your pocket," which is basically him having a go at the Juventus owners for not giving him enough transfer kitty to basically push them on and look to challenge for the Champions League. Then he went to Chelsea and he had that brilliant first season where everything was rosy, and then he had a series of fallouts, didn't he, in the second season? And then even though he won the FA Cup, they basically, they sacked him essentially, didn't he? He got his payoff. I know he had to basically take him to court to get his payoff because Chelsea tried to argue that it was more of it genuinely was like a mutual thing that he agreed to go. They were trying to paint it as in he agreed to step down when he's turning around saying, "No, I didn't, I was sacked." And ultimately he won, he got his money. So he was essentially sacked from Chelsea, but he wasn't sacked because he wasn't good enough. He was sacked because he just got fed up of arguing with him. And he's gone to Inter Milan now, and again, he's riding high, but he was having problems with Inter Milan behind the scenes even last summer. I was surprised. I was surprised he stayed at Inter Milan for a second season, because when they were going to play in the Europa League final against Sevilla, he was basically talking like he had one foot out the door, wasn't he? I remember he said to him after Inter Milan lost in that final, "Do you expect to be the Inter Milan manager next season?" And he gave a very non-committal answer, which is, to me, sounded like, "No, I don't think so. I just don't want to say it." And whatever it is, maybe they got around a table and convinced him to stay, but it's always looked like it was always going to be a short marriage between Conte and Inter Milan, didn't it? So if Conte came in here, would he be again a manager who's moaning over things he's not happy with? He seems like he's a manager who is very he'd moan over little things type thing.
Yeah.
He was definitely that way at Chelsea, and he was definitely that way at Juventus. So no, I agree with you. It's not the right
man. He's not the right man at all. And I think we've got this concept that we're applying for the managers. It's the same as what we've been saying about the players. You can go on all day about all these Hollywood signings that you want to make. All these people going on about, Aaron Ramsey, Coutinho, Gareth Bale, Wilfred Zaha. These are all names to be firing up FIFA and playing and all that. But these aren't going to be the answer for Everton Football Club. We signed Ben Godfrey. No one had heard of him, and he was essentially. Well, he was our best player last season. So I think the same has to go for managers, which brings me on to my next point about a few people in the comments are asking about Graham Potter. Not necessarily a big name, but could he do a job?
No, I wouldn't want him personally. I mean, I think Graham Potter will move on from Brighton in the next year or two. I think he will get a job that's a step up from Brighton, whether that, who knows what that will be, but it's not going to be a club that's, even in the state we're in, it's not going to be a club as big as Everton, and it shouldn't be a club as big as Everton. Graham Potter, even if fans were bang up for it, even if he'd have got Brighton into Europe last season and he was kind of the hottest thing on the block, I think it would just be too much of a change in style for us, because he's going to want to play possession football, isn't he? And we haven't got the players to do that. We just haven't. As much as the supporters want to see us play front foot football, and we're saying, "Oh, the Ancelotti was too negative in games, and we need to be getting after teams more." You can't do it when you just don't have the personnel. For me personally, I don't really subscribe to this XG and negative football and positive football. For me, there's just effective football and there's non-effective football, and you just find the style of play that's most effective with the players you've got. If Graham Potter came in tomorrow, and even if he had all the greatest ideas in the world, I just don't think he could really get Everton going, at least not not in the first season, because he's going to have to implement his methods, and he's going to have to get the personnel he wants, and we can't afford to just have another season where we're knocking around doing nothing, really, can we?
Yeah,
so
a lot of people are really against it.
That's what the best we could hope for under Graham Potter in the first season, that we just basically have another season like we've just had, where we're not in any trouble, but we're not really looking like we're going to challenge for anything or do anything. and he hasn't got enough on his CV for fans to swallow that, have we? If we were going to get another manager on the level of an Ancelotti or even a Conte, I think fans would be able to just kind of get on with fans would accept the fact that, all right, maybe it's not going to be big things this season, but we're confident it's going to be big things the season after. There's no guarantee of that under Graham Potter. If we got Graham Potter, fans will be thinking, why are we suffering through this crap season when there's no guarantee this fella's even going to make us any better next year? So no, he's not done enough for me, Graham Potter. Not in personal.
And for me as well, it's the whole this whole thing about how he doesn't take very well to fans' disapproval. So this is Jesus Christ, this isn't the right option for him at all. A lot of people are really against Graham Potter, and I can see why. Wormy Spoon says he is on a long contract with Brighton. We won't hit him up without Brighton's okay, and I just don't think it's worth the hassle at all. Moving on, and this guy is the name who I personally wanted to come in, and don't know what your thoughts are on this name. This was more of last week's rumour, because we all know how quickly it changes on a daily basis. I think this was last week's big thing over the weekend, was Christophe Galtier. For me, he was really the one who I wanted to come in. I feel like he just fit the mould for everything that he did at Saint-Etienne, at Lille. I just feel like the way he conducts himself at a football club, working with directors of football, I just feel like he was the right fit. Whether we get him or not is a completely different thing, because there's a lot of talk about him going to Nice and, it being out of our control. But what are your thoughts on the Galtier stories? That might be in the rearview mirror a bit now, but can you see it still happening? But first of all, what are your thoughts on him as a manager?
What you just said, I mean, we spoke about him last week on a manager's video, and I didn't know an awful lot about him at the time. I mean, I know he got Saint-Etienne into Europe, and obviously he's just coming off winning the league with Lille. But he's basically his trademark. He's made his name by signing players cheap and developing them and then selling them off for big profits, hasn't he? And that's exactly the sort of manager Everton needs, and what I'd love to see come into Everton. And it helps the fact that he's kind of at the right age. Is he in his early 50s?
Yep.
Yeah, he's at a good age as well, where he's experienced, but he's not too old where you'd think his best days are behind him, and he's just after the payday. So I'd love Chris Galtier if we could get him. I haven't really kept up with him the last couple of days, Cal. Maybe you'll know better than me. What's going on? Why has he not been announced by Nice? It's like with us with Nuno, but it seemed like everyone was saying the deal was done, and that Everton were essentially wasting their own time trying to get him because Nice had him under lock and key. Do you know anything at all? Is there any reason why he's not been announced by Nice that you know of?
Well, this is it. The whole sort of sticking point with the Galtier thing was because there was a wide understanding that he had verbal agreement with Nice and that he was set for Nice, and the way it was being made out on Twitter the other day, it was as if this was an imminent announcement, and this was set to be announced, and he was all but signed, sealed, delivered to be the next manager in Nice, and a lot of fans sort of were like, okay, maybe move on from that. But that we're still waiting on that. And, I don't know whether we can read between the lines. Is that something to do with Everton's pursuit of him, or Everton really trying and pushing to maybe sign him? I mean, he is third favourite at 12-1 to be the Everton manager. So, maybe there is a bit more to that than we think. But as we know so well, it is literally the managerial situation is changing on a daily basis. So we've just got to come in. Lille and Nice are meant to be arguing about the compensation fee, but it is very quiet. So there you go. If that is true, then that could shed a bit of light on that. But of course, I would love for Galtier to be our manager.
You'd love to think that the reason it's not been announced is because we've got on the phone to him and he wants to hear what we've got to say. Just like I think the situation, which I think is the situation that happened between Nuno and Palace. That they were basically the deal was done, but when Everton got on the phone, he basically jogged back a few steps. But for all we know, it could be just a case of he's on his holidays and he just hasn't physically come back to the country and signed it yet. Do you remember that's what happened with Ronald Koeman? Koeman was done, but a bit of paperwork needed to be signed, and Ronald Koeman was on like his third holiday of the summer in the Maldives or somewhere like that, and he had to physically wait for him to come back off holiday and go to the actual the office, whatever it was, has been set up, and actually sign the paper. That's all it was. He had to just literally sign his name on a bit of paper, and then it could be formally announced. And he was on holiday, wherever he was, and they wanted to fax it to him, and he said, no, not till I've finished my holidays. Because I remember when he was first interviewed on the club website after it being announced, he was actually in whatever country he was in. He had a pair of shorts on, from like just his beach shorts, do you know what I mean? And they just threw him an Everton training kit to put on so he could have a few photos taken. So it could be that. Maybe Chris Galtier's just sat off on the beach somewhere having a can of lager or a pina colada or something, and soon as he's back in the country, Nice are going to announce him. But I'm with you. He'd be my first choice, and I'd like to think that Everton are frantically speaking to his representatives, trying to hijack the deal. But every day
that's what we'd like to think. Yeah.
Every day that passes, though, it seems like that's more and more likely because, as we mentioned earlier on with Nuno, when I saw the stories about Nuno on Friday night, I thought, well, that's it. Nuno will be announced tomorrow afternoon or Sunday night at the latest. And I kept thinking the thing with Galtier, thinking he's going to be announced on Monday or he's going to be announced Tuesday afternoon. And we're in Tuesday evening now and he still hasn't been announced. And
yeah, and
it wouldn't shock me if he was announced tomorrow. So
I'm just looking at the comments now, and Mr. Rondon Mon has made a good point here as well. He said the media have people chasing their own tails, which I think is very, very true. I feel like we just don't know how many of these stories, like, for example, the Conte one, are just being branded about for the sake of other clubs to maybe get a move on and, sounding other clubs out. We don't know.
Jerry Gibson, who does Toffee Blues USA, made a brilliant point when I spoke to him, I think about a year or so ago, when we were... Ironically, when we were talking about who was going to replace Marco Silva, he made a brilliant point when he said Everton in the nose nowadays, now that Brands has basically took over as director of football, because prior to Brands, the Echo were pretty clued up. Paul Joyce was always be the guy who gets the scoop, whereas Paul Joyce is still reliable now, but he's not like the first guy to report the news now, is he? Everton in the nose are like unicorns. They don't actually exist. There's people who swear that they do and never seen one. And there's some horses that look really good and could maybe pass for one, but they're not real. So Everton in the nose are like unicorns. You might see one that you'd swear to God is an Everton in the know, but he physically can't be, because Marcel Brands, I don't think, has any sources in the media. I don't know of anyone in the media who has direct access to Marcel Brands, and nothing gets out of the club, you don't think, unless Marcel Brands approves it. Well, you'd like to think so anyway.
Yeah, it is all very quiet, isn't it? One other point that I just want to bring up to you as well is, and this was a tweet that was put out by a mate of mine who's a Red actually today. I feel like he made a very good point in light of and I want to hear people's comments about this as well. In light of all the different names that are being branded about, at the end of the day, we seem to have a situation where Ken Wright wants, well, if we're going off today's news, Ken Wright wants Benitez, possibly Moyes, Martinez. I know probably not Moyes now, but the point I'm trying to make. Brands wants Galtier. Yeah. Mashiri wants Santo or Martinez, and it just feels like it feels like everyone in the boardroom seems to be tugging in different directions. And do you think that is, more than anything else, that is the problem? That there seems to be no real fixated direction, and I feel like that in itself is Everton's problem more than anything, isn't it?
There's too many chefs in the kitchen, isn't there? You've got to have one chef who decides what's going in the broth and when the broth's getting served. Bashiri, he's gone on record saying he wants a Hollywood manager. I suppose it's hard to argue because he is the majority shareholder. It is his money at the end of the day. So he's, more than anyone, will feel entitled to sticking his oar in and interfering. And it's hard to argue that he hasn't got the right to do that. But if you're going to do that, then what's the point in having a director of football?
Exactly.
And I've had this argument with my brother before because when we signed players, and the story is that it wasn't Brands, it was more Mashiri. I thought, well, if Marcel Brands as the director of football is allowing himself to be undermined like that, if he's going to have someone go over his head, even if it is his boss, basically do his job for him, then kind of what's he even here for? Marcel Brands is a well-respected team on the continent. If Marcel Brands resigned from Everton because he wasn't happy with the way things were going, he could walk into another top club or somewhere around Europe. He's got that good a reputation. Doesn't need the money. And it's not like he's been here forever and he's so used to the city and he's so used to the people. Marcel Brands could probably leave Everton tomorrow and look back with no regrets. So it makes me think, if these rumours are true, there are times when Brands isn't listened to, or he's not allowed to do his job the way he should be, because Ken Wright or Mashiri or whoever are basically overruling him, then he should just pick his coat up and go, because as the director of football, you should be in charge of everything at the football club in terms of how it impacts the football team. Yeah. But the director of football now is essentially what the manager was 20 years ago. He's the constant, isn't he? It shouldn't really make too much of a difference who the head coach is. This is what we should be doing. We shouldn't be hiring a manager. We should be hiring a head coach. Marcel Brands should sign the players. Marcel Brands should sell the players. Marcel Brands should decide who's getting new contracts. the head coach should come in and he should be told, right, here's the group of players you've got. You work with them and get the best out of them. And I'll come to you when we're going to basically take a player out or we're going to bring a player in. And that's what I think the club needs to get towards, where it seems like there are times when, again, we don't know what we want to do. We want to bring in managers like Ancelotti, who is not going to allow himself to be basically shut out like that, is he? And I don't blame him. There's other managers like Kenwright, who is got his loyalties. As we know, he's a big fan of Moyes, isn't he? Apparently, he wanted to keep Martinez longer than we did, but Moshiri put his foot down on that one. And again, we've got Moshiri, who's chasing in the vanity signs, isn't he? Like the likes of Ronald Koeman, the likes of Ancelotti, the likes of Conte, if those rumours are to be believed. So until Moshiri takes a step back and just goes back to Monaco and agrees to just be happy and write the checks and leave the running of the club to Marcel Brands, and until Kenwright, whether he retires or whether he goes and just becomes the life president or just basically steps away from the decision-making process, until they just leave it all in the hands of Marcel Brands, I just don't think the club are really going to go anywhere, because all the top clubs all over the continent have one man who in power, one man making the decision.
It's also very confusing, and for a lot of fans, I think a lot of fans feel very much in the dark. I think that's fair to say, because I think it might have been Cam on the Mighty Blues, and he put out a tweet the other day. I think he retweeted. I think it was Wolves actually, and they actually sat down. They're making a series on YouTube where the director of football sits down and actually answers questions from the fans and gives them some kind of indication of where the club's going. Now, okay, Everton do have a director of football in place, but we're seeing things coming out that Kenwright's pushing for your Benitez of this world, and for me, it just makes zero sense if they've just handed Brand a 3-year contract, and this is the man who's allegedly supposed to be making these decisions, and we just can't make a head or a tail as to where the final choice being made. I'm just going to the comments now, and we've just another one here from Inky Squid. He said, "This is all affecting our transfer window." How much of a point do you think that is? Do you feel like Brands knows who he wants to get, or do you feel like this will have an effect in our transfer window?
It's got to have an effect, hasn't it? Because I imagine our targets were set and Ancelotti had agreed to them, and Ancelotti's gone now. So I hope it's a case of what I just mentioned a minute ago, where Brands is thinking, well, it doesn't matter that Ancelotti's gone and Nuno or whoever's coming in. These are the players I'm set on, and whoever the new guy is, he's just going to have to accept that these are the players I'm going after, and these are the players who I'm going to look to bring in the club. And the new manager, whoever he is, shouldn't be going to Marcel Brands saying, right, I want this player, and this player. He should be told, if that's what he does, no, that's not your job. You don't get a say in that. I'm a director of football. I decide who comes to the club, and I decide who we're selling. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't have accepted the job, or that's what they should say to him before he takes the job on. You do know when you come into this club that you are not going to have a substantial say in who basically comes in and out the door. But you touched on a good point when you said Wolves are doing a documentary where the director of football is kind of going to get his face on camera and he's going to kind of talk to the fans and answer questions. I really wish Marcel Brands would do that more. He doesn't do many interviews, does he? Especially not in English. And as I mentioned before, he doesn't seem like he has any links to the English media. There's no sort of reporter who you think, right, if he's reporting that, then it's got to be true, because that's come from Marcel Brands. Paul Joyce is well known for being very close to Kenwright and other members at the club who've been there for a long time under Kenwright's tenure. Jim White's obviously got access to Moshiri, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Marcel Brands doesn't seem like he's got any, like, a go-to man who, if he wants something put out in the media, then that reporter will report it. So if you're not going to do that, then I'd really like Marcel Brands to just maybe every 6 to 12 months or so. I mean, I think he should definitely be doing one this summer now. I really hope he does. There's still time. Just get on the Everton website with someone who works for the club media and just do a half an hour sit down where it doesn't necessarily have to answer fans' questions, but just talk to the fans and say, right, this is how the summer's gone for me. This is when I found out Carlo wanted to leave. This is what I did on my first day of searching for the new manager. This is what I was looking for when I interviewed the new manager. This is when I decided that this manager who we got, whether it's Nuno or someone else, this was when I decided that this manager was absolutely the person we were going to hire. I just really want to see Marcel Brands communicate with the fans more, and I think it would really do him a lot of good if he did, because Marcel Brands has got his detractors, and I think he'd shut a lot of them up if he just was willing to engage more.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we finish up, what you're saying there, it's spot on. I think everyone just wants a bit of communication more than anything, because I think a lot of fans do feel in the dark about the whole situation. And, I have no doubt that, that has been a tough time for the club. But, I think the fans just want a bit of clarity and just know what sort of direction we're going in. Just a few more comments before we finish up. We've got one here that says, people are calling for Conte 1 minute, then settling for the season under Dunk the next. I love Dunk, but he's the manager we need from Doodles. I think he's implying Conte there. It's a good shout, and I do get the reasoning for Conte. I do. He's a proven manager, world class manager, so to say. He's seen it, done it, but I think we've been stung by what's happened with Ancelotti, and I think that does leave a sour taste, doesn't it?
Cal,
yeah.
We can still hear you on the stream, just I can't. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you what. I'll just mute myself.
Yeah. Okay. So got another comment in. Flash the original. It says it's Big Dunk or Potter for me. Bramley Moor Dock isn't just a change of location; it's a progressive statement, and we need that managed long-term plan. Yeah. I totally get that. In comparison to some of the other managers, they seem to be a lot younger. They seem to be, they bring something different to the table. I think a big argument for Big Dunk would be that he gets the club, and maybe that is something that we haven't really gone down. But the big question mark over Duncan Ferguson at the moment is, can he do it over the course of a season? Toothy Orphai says very worrying times. I can see why. It seems to be a time where a lot of people do feel a bit disconnected from the club, and myself included. Terry McAllister, last couple now. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Everton need a culture that works for the team and not against it. Appoint a manager who signs up for the transfer vision and doesn't just want his old players. Yep, absolutely fair point. We need clarity, and we need to know where we're going. And I think when you mentioned culture there, I think that comes back around to wanting to know who's making these decisions. We touched on Brands before. We touched on Al Mashiri and, potentially Kenwright sticking their oar in. And, is that the way forward? I don't think it is. Okay, so I think I'm quite happy to wrap up there, Paul, unless you've got anything else you want to add to the conversation. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, so I'm happy with that. So yeah, thanks for tuning in.
No, it's been a good chat, isn't it? And
go on, mate.
I will ask you this. Cards on the table now. Who do you think will get announced as the Everton manager? Do you think it will be Nuno? Do you think it will be Galtier? Do you think it will be someone completely out of left field who we're not expecting? Because every day that rumbles on, it just seems like Nuno gets slightly less likely, and that the likes maybe Galtier, if we're still talking to him, because he hasn't been announced by Nice, as we've been talking about, a sort of a different appointment becomes slightly more likely. I mean, hand on heart, I think it will be Nuno, but I think Nuno won't be their first choice. I think right now they're trying to get someone else, and if they don't get that person, they'll go back to Nuno, because I can just picture Nuno sat with it in his house now, just waiting for the phone to ring. And imagine if it doesn't ring, and he turns on Sky Sports News and he sees that Chris Galtier has been announced as the Everton manager, or Antonio Conte has been announced as the Everton manager. But I really want to get the new manager in place now, because I want to just crack on with getting some new signings, because we need new signings, because the squad, as we saw in the second half of last season especially, this squad, unless it has some major makeover, is not good enough to get into Europe. It's just not, even with a world-class manager. So I want next season to be a lot better. And even if we get a manager who I like and I trust, you can't have any confidence it's going to get better until we get signings in. And we're not going to sign any new signings until we get the manager in place. So I'm just hoping by the week's end, we get the manager, and by next week and the week after that, and hopefully before the Euros is finished, we can get all our business done. What about you?
Yeah, you're spot on. I feel like what's happened here is a lot. I feel like this whole managerial situation that a lot of us didn't see coming, let's be honest, has papered over the cracks of just how woeful this side is and how awful some of them players are that are getting games in week out, sitting on the bench. This has definitely distracted a lot of people from just how poor our squad is. So you're spot on in terms of wanting to get the manager in quickly, ideally before the end of the Euros, as quick as possible, so we can then concentrate on the upcoming season. To answer your question about who I think it's going to be, if I could give you an answer straight up now, I feel like it probably will be Nuno. I just feel like this is the name that just hasn't gone away and has always been mentioned. I mean, from the day, even the day before Ancelotti left, Nuno was mentioned, and still to this day he hasn't gone away. So there's definitely some substance in there. Of course, we've seen it changes. It changes all the time, literally by the hour. We're always getting new updates on Twitter all the time, so it can change so very quickly, as we've seen. But if I have to give an answer right now, who I think it's going to be, I think it's probably pointing towards Nuno. Although I would like Galtier, but I think you're probably spot on with Nuno, definitely. Okay, so yeah, we happy with that? Okay, so yep, thanks for watching, everyone. Yeah, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning into the Toffee Blues. Thank you.